Have you noticed how some periods of life seem to move effortlessly, while others feel like you're pushing against an invisible wall? You try harder. You become more disciplined. You invest more energy. Yet somehow, the results become slower, stranger, almost as if reality itself is resisting you. And what makes it unsettling is that deep down, you've probably sensed that this isn't just bad luck. It's a pattern, one that keeps appearing in different forms, wearing different faces. What if there's a forgotten law operating beneath many of the experiences you've been having lately? A law that influences what captures your attention, what opportunities seem to appear, what relationships remain, and even which versions of yourself feel possible. Most people never notice it because they spend their lives looking at the visible effects while missing the invisible cause. But once you begin to see it, certain events from your past start making sense in a way they never did before. And the strange part is this: the law has been shaping your reality long before you knew it existed. There is a moment that almost everyone experiences, though few people stop to examine it closely. It happens when you become intensely focused on making something happen. A relationship, a career move, a personal transformation. You pour more energy into it, convince yourself that effort is the answer, and begin pushing harder. Yet strangely, the harder you push, the more distant the outcome seems to become. At first, this feels unfair. After all, we're taught that determination solves problems, that persistence overcomes obstacles. And often, that's true. But there is a subtle point where effort quietly transforms into force. Most people never notice when they cross that line. They only notice the exhaustion that follows. Think about the times you desperately wanted someone to understand you. The more you explained yourself, the less understood you felt. Or the times you tried to convince someone to stay, only to watch them pull away even further. Something invisible seemed to happen, not because your intentions were wrong, but because force creates a pressure that life naturally reacts against. Nature reveals this pattern everywhere. The tighter you grip water, the faster it escapes your hand. The more desperately you chase sleep, the more awake you become. The harder you try to appear confident, the more self-conscious you feel. Certain things cannot be forced into existence. They emerge when conditions are right. What's fascinating is that resistance often disguises itself as an external problem. We blame circumstances, timing, other people, or bad luck. Yet sometimes the resistance is being generated from within. Not because you're doing too little, but because you're trying to control what can only be allowed. Many people reach a point where their old strategies stop working. What once produced results suddenly produces frustration. It feels confusing because they assume they need more effort, when reality may be asking for a different relationship with effort altogether. This is often when life begins teaching a lesson that cannot be learned through force. And if you've been feeling lately as though certain doors refuse to open no matter how hard you push, there may be a reason. Perhaps the obstacle isn't the door. Perhaps it's the way you're approaching it. Because there is another force quietly shaping reality, one that has far more influence than most people realize. That force is attention. And once you understand where your attention is truly going, you'll begin to see why certain experiences seem to grow stronger no matter how much you wish they would disappear. Most people think attention is something they use. Very few realize attention is also something that uses them. It quietly decides what becomes important, what becomes familiar, and eventually, what becomes real. Not because reality changes, but because your experience of reality begins organizing itself around whatever receives your focus. Have you ever bought a new car and suddenly noticed the same model everywhere? The cars were always there. They didn't magically appear overnight. What changed was your attention. Something entered your awareness, and reality seemed to rearrange itself around it. The experience feels ordinary, but it reveals something profound. Attention functions like a spotlight moving through an infinite landscape. Wherever it shines, details become visible, patterns emerge, connections appear, opportunities reveal themselves. Yet at the same time, Everything outside the beam fades into the background. This means that attention doesn't just reveal reality. It also hides parts of it. This is why two people can live in the same city, work similar jobs, and experience completely different worlds. One constantly notices kindness, opportunities, and meaningful encounters. Another notices disappointment, unfairness, and evidence that life is against them. Neither person is necessarily wrong. They are simply feeding different realities through attention. What's interesting is that attention doesn't always follow conscious choice. Often, it follows emotion. Whatever worries you repeatedly gains your focus. Whatever frightens you keeps pulling your awareness back. Whatever unresolved question lives inside you quietly demands attention again and again. And over time, attention begins creating familiarity. Familiarity creates expectation. Expectation starts influencing perception. Suddenly, you are no longer observing reality objectively. You're participating in the creation of the experience you're having. Not through magic, but through a process so subtle that most people never notice it happening. This explains why certain seasons of life feel trapped in repetition. The same relationship dynamics, the same disappointments, the same emotional cycles wearing different disguises. The external details change, but the underlying pattern remains. Something inside continues directing attention toward the same kinds of evidence. But this leads to a deeper mystery. If attention keeps strengthening what it repeatedly observes, what determines where attention goes in the first place? Why do some people naturally focus on possibility while others unconsciously search for confirmation of their fears? The answer lies in another hidden law, one that operates beneath awareness and quietly shapes everything you believe to be true. Most people assume they see reality first and form beliefs afterward. But if you've lived long enough, you've probably noticed moments that don't fit that explanation. Two people experience the same event, yet walk away with completely different conclusions. One sees a new beginning. The other sees proof that nothing ever changes. The event was the same. The meaning was not. Hidden beneath awareness is a tendency of the mind that quietly shapes perception. Once a belief settles deeply enough, the mind begins searching for evidence that supports it. Not because it wants to deceive you, but because it wants consistency. The unknown feels unstable. Certainty, even painful certainty, feels safer. This is why someone who secretly believes they are unworthy often notices rejection more easily than acceptance. Compliments pass through them like wind through an open window, while criticism remains for years. Another person may receive the exact same feedback and barely remember it. The difference isn't the world. It's the filter through which the world is being interpreted. You've probably seen this happen in your own life. Perhaps there was a period when everything seemed to confirm your fears. Every delay felt like failure. Every disagreement felt like abandonment. Every uncertainty felt like evidence that something was wrong. Looking back, you may realize that reality wasn't actually sending those messages. Your mind was connecting dots according to a story it already believed. The strange part is that these stories often begin long before we become aware of them. A childhood experience, a painful relationship, a moment of humiliation, a period of loneliness. The event ends, but the interpretation remains. Years later, the mind is still searching for proof that the old conclusion was correct. And here's where the forgotten law becomes especially powerful. The mind doesn't only confirm negative beliefs. It confirms positive ones as well. People who deeply expect meaning often notice meaningful coincidences. Those who believe growth is possible tend to recognize opportunities hidden inside difficulties. Again, reality hasn't necessarily changed. The lens has. This creates a paradox. We think we're discovering reality, while much of the time we're discovering reflections of our own expectations. The evidence appears objective because it exists outside us. Yet the selection process is happening internally. We notice what resonates with the beliefs already operating beneath the surface. And if beliefs are quietly directing attention, and attention is quietly shaping experience, Then an even deeper question begins to emerge. What creates those beliefs in the first place? What invisible force determines which possibilities feel natural and which feel impossible? To answer that, we have to look beyond beliefs themselves and examine something even more influential: identity. There is a reason why two people can read the same books, follow the same advice, work equally hard, and still arrive at completely different destinations. Most explanations focus on talent, discipline, or opportunity. Yet beneath all of those factors lies something far more powerful. Something so close to you that you rarely notice it. Identity is not what you tell other people about yourself. It is the quiet answer that appears when nobody is asking. It is the hidden image you carry inside. The version of yourself that feels familiar. And whether you realize it or not, your life constantly moves toward reinforcing that image. Imagine someone who sees themselves as confident. They may still feel fear. They may still make mistakes. But those experiences do not redefine who they are. They interpret temporary setbacks through the lens of confidence. Now imagine someone who secretly sees themselves as incapable. The smallest obstacle feels like proof. The smallest failure feels permanent. This is why effort alone often reaches a limit. You can force yourself to act differently for a while. You can adopt new habits. You can create ambitious goals. But if those actions conflict with your deepest sense of self, eventually something inside begins pulling you back toward what feels familiar. Not because you lack willpower, but because identity seeks consistency. Perhaps you've experienced this yourself. You begin making progress, and suddenly strange forms of self-sabotage appear. Procrastination returns. Doubt grows louder. Opportunities are ignored. From the outside, it seems irrational. Yet on a deeper level, part of you may be protecting an old identity that no longer matches who you're becoming. What's fascinating is that identity doesn't always announce itself openly. It hides inside casual thoughts, small assumptions, tiny statements repeated so often they seem like facts. That's just the way I am. People like me don't do that. Things never work out for me. These phrases appear harmless, but they quietly define the boundaries of possibility. The forgotten law operates here with incredible precision. Reality often responds less to what you want and more to who you believe yourself to be. Not instantly, not perfectly, but consistently over time. Actions emerge from identity. Decisions emerge from identity. Relationships emerge from identity. Entire futures emerge from identity. Entire futures emerge from identity. And yet identity itself is not fixed. It shifts slowly, often through experiences so subtle they go unnoticed at first. A realization, a new perspective, a moment that changes the meaning of an old story. The question is not whether your identity is shaping your reality. The question is whether the version shaping your reality still belongs to who you are becoming. Because once identity begins changing, another challenge appears. A challenge that silently drains momentum from countless lives. It has nothing to do with intelligence or effort. It comes from trying to move in two directions at the same time. And until that conflict is understood, even the strongest identity struggles to fully express itself. Most people think exhaustion comes from doing too much. Sometimes it does, but there is another kind of exhaustion that feels different. It appears even when your schedule isn't overwhelming. It follows you into quiet moments. It lingers after rest, and no amount of sleep seems to fully remove it. This kind of fatigue often comes from carrying opposing realities inside yourself at the same time. One part of you wants change. Another part wants safety. One part is ready to move forward. Another is still holding on to an older version of life. The conflict may be invisible, but its effects are everywhere. You can feel it when you make a decision and immediately begin arguing with yourself. You can feel it when an opportunity arrives and excitement is followed by hesitation. You can feel it when something you've wanted for years finally becomes possible, yet a strange resistance emerges from nowhere, as if some hidden part of you is pulling in the opposite direction. Most people interpret this as confusion, but often it is not confusion at all. It is division. Energy scattered across competing desires, competing identities, competing futures. Like a river splitting into multiple channels, the force becomes weaker even though the total volume remains the same. Think about how much energy is consumed by indecision alone. Entire weeks can disappear inside internal debates. Entire years can be spent standing between two lives, unable to fully commit to either one. Outwardly, very little seems to happen. Inwardly, enormous amounts of energy are being burned. This is why some people make remarkable progress with less effort than others. It isn't necessarily because they are smarter, more talented, or more disciplined. It's because their energy is moving in one direction. Their actions, beliefs, emotions, and intentions are no longer fighting each other. Yet life has a strange way of revealing hidden division. It often appears during periods of transition, when old dreams stop inspiring you, when familiar goals lose their meaning, when relationships, careers, or ambitions no longer fit who you're becoming. What feels like uncertainty may actually be evidence that an inner reorganization is already underway. And this raises an uncomfortable possibility. If divided energy weakens momentum, what happens when the same thoughts keep repeating day after day, year after year? What if those recurring thoughts are doing far more than influencing your mood? What if they are quietly shaping the very experiences that continue appearing in your life? Have you ever noticed that certain themes seem to follow you through different chapters of life? Different people, same conflict. Different people, same conflict. Different jobs, same frustration. Different environments, same emotional pattern. At some point, it becomes difficult to dismiss as coincidence. Most people focus on the external repetition. They notice the recurring circumstances but rarely investigate the recurring thoughts beneath them. Yet thoughts are not isolated events. They create emotional atmospheres. And emotional atmospheres influence perception, behavior, and the choices we make without realizing it. A single thought passing through the mind means very little. Thousands of repetitions, however, begin creating something much larger. They form pathways, expectations, assumptions, entire frameworks through which reality is interpreted. Eventually, these mental patterns become so familiar that they feel invisible. This doesn't mean thoughts magically create reality. The process is subtler than that. Repeated thoughts influence what you notice. They influence how you interpret events. They influence the risks you take, the opportunities you ignore, and the people you trust. Over time, these countless small influences begin producing remarkably consistent outcomes. Consider someone who repeatedly thinks that disappointment is inevitable. They may not consciously choose failure. In fact, they may desperately want success. Yet that expectation quietly influences behavior. They hesitate at crucial moments. They prepare for loss instead of possibility. They withdraw when persistence is needed most. The thought becomes a lens through which decisions are made. The same principle appears in more positive ways as well. People who repeatedly contemplate possibility often behave differently long before results arrive. They notice openings others miss. They recover more quickly from setbacks. They remain engaged where others disengage. The experience looks like luck from the outside, but something deeper is occurring. Perhaps this is why certain thoughts keep returning. Not all recurring thoughts are problems to solve. Some may be signals. Some may be pointing toward unresolved fears. Others may be pointing toward unrealized potential. The important question isn't simply what you're thinking. It's why those particular thoughts keep demanding your attention. And if repeated thoughts eventually become repeated experiences, then another distinction becomes critically important. Not everything in life can be controlled through effort. Some situations improve when we act. Others improve only when we stop fighting them. Learning the difference may be one of the most important forgotten laws of all. There comes a point in many people's lives when they realize that control is not producing the results it once did. The plans become more detailed. The effort becomes more intense. The need for certainty grows stronger. Yet instead of creating clarity, everything begins to feel heavier, more complicated, more resistant. This realization often arrives during periods of profound change. A relationship evolves unexpectedly. A career path loses its meaning. A dream you've carried for years suddenly feels distant. The instinctive response is to tighten your grip, to manage every detail, to force the future into a shape that feels predictable. But life rarely responds well to that approach for very long. Control has its place. It helps you build skills. It helps you keep commitments. It helps you move through practical realities. Yet many of the most important experiences in life arrive through a completely different process. Love cannot be controlled. Meaning cannot be controlled. Creativity cannot be controlled. Even personal transformation often refuses to obey strict commands. Think about the moments that changed you most deeply. Many of them were probably unplanned. A conversation, a coincidence, a realization that appeared while walking alone, a chance encounter that altered the direction of your life. Looking back, these moments seem almost impossible to schedule into existence. This is where alignment enters the picture. Alignment is not passivity. It is not giving up. It is not waiting for the universe to solve your problems. Alignment means acting from a place of coherence rather than conflict. It means recognizing when effort is flowing naturally and when it is being consumed by resistance. It means learning to cooperate with reality instead of constantly fighting it. Many people spend years trying to control outcomes while ignoring the internal conditions from which those outcomes emerge. They focus on changing circumstances without noticing the assumptions, fears, identities, and patterns that continue generating the same experiences. The struggle becomes endless because the source remains untouched. And perhaps that's why some doors open the moment you stop forcing them. Not because you surrendered your intention, but because you stopped interfering with it. You stopped creating friction between where you are and where you're trying to go. Yet even this insight points towards something deeper. If alignment shapes what unfolds, and if unseen patterns shape alignment, then perhaps reality is operating according to rules that most people never consciously notice. Rules so subtle that they remain invisible while quietly influencing everything. Most people spend their lives studying effects. They study circumstances, outcomes, successes, failures, relationships, opportunities. They analyze what happened without asking what invisible pattern may have caused it. And because of that, they often find themselves trapped in cycles they cannot fully explain. But the forgotten law we've been uncovering throughout this journey points toward a different way of seeing. What if reality is constantly reflecting hidden patterns that exist beneath conscious awareness? Not as punishment, not as reward, simply as a mirror. The resistance you encounter may reveal where force has replaced flow. The experiences that repeatedly capture your attention may reveal what is quietly growing stronger inside your awareness. The evidence you constantly find may reveal the beliefs you carry. The outcomes you repeatedly create may reveal the identity you have accepted as true. When viewed separately, these seem like unrelated observations. When viewed together, they begin forming a map of the invisible forces shaping visible life. This is why seemingly small internal shifts can produce surprisingly large external changes. A new belief alters attention. New attention changes perception. New perception influences decisions. New decisions create different experiences. The change appears sudden from the outside, but it has often been unfolding beneath the surface for a long time. You've probably witnessed this in your own life already. Perhaps there was a period when everything seemed to be falling apart, only to realize later that an old version of yourself was dissolving. Perhaps there was a strange coincidence that arrived exactly when you needed it. Perhaps there was a recurring challenge that kept appearing until you finally understood what it was trying to reveal. The deeper you look, the harder it becomes to believe that life is merely a collection of disconnected events. Patterns begin appearing. Connections emerge. Meaning reveals itself in places where you once saw randomness. And maybe that is what most people never see. Not the law itself, but the fact that it has been operating all along. That the reality surrounding them has been quietly responding to invisible conditions they rarely stop to examine. And that the moment they begin noticing those conditions, the entire relationship with reality starts to change. Perhaps the forgotten law was never truly forgotten. Perhaps it has been speaking to you through every resistance, every coincidence, every recurring thought, every unexpected turning point you've experienced throughout your life. Not as something outside of you, but as something woven into the way experience itself unfolds. The more we've explored these hidden patterns, the clearer one thing becomes. Reality is not only shaped by what happens to you, it is also shaped by what you repeatedly attend to, what you believe, who you think you are, and whether you're in a world is moving in harmony or conflict. And maybe that's why this message found you now, because some part of you was already beginning to notice, already sensing that certain experiences were not random, already feeling that something important was changing beneath the surface. If this journey resonated with you, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Not because you need more answers, but because these conversations are for people who have begun asking deeper questions about the patterns hidden within ordinary life.